Okay. Hi guys, my name is Harley Jasper and I am doing my presentation on my abortion and mental health paper. So, to get started, there are a few ways of framing the question, but I just want to focus on this one. This is kind of what the article mental health or abortion and mental health evaluating the evidence, excuse me, um, but mine is more down here, kind of where I'm aiming towards, which is do women feel a sense of loss during and after abortion to which there can be a connection to mental illness? So, a little bit of background information. Back in 1980 and 1990, a surgeon named Coop said that in his letter during a Supreme Court case that there are no psychological evidence that abortion and mental illness had any connection at all. But however, there are risk factors. Now, which is very vague considering the fact that this is more about abortion and mental health and not so much the risk factors of having an abortion. Now, that's where the confusion lies, but we'll get into that a little bit here in a minute. So, the surgeon goes on to say that, yeah, there could be, but there isn't because psychologists said there isn't, and I'm not going to really look into it. But I can tell you that there are risk factors and there are physical health risks of abortion. Keep in mind, back in 1980 and 1990, the medical field for having an abortion didn't have all the tools and techniques that it does today. So it was vastly more dangerous per se to have an abortion then than it is today. Now, it is a pretty critical procedure, and if you do the traditional abortion, there are many medications that you end up having to take, and you essentially are numb when you have this abortion. So the overall question to what I'm asking, which is, do women feel a sense of loss during and after abortion? Is there a connection? No. However, psychologists and scientists wanted to bring it back a little bit and wanted to ask the question again and find the answer to it. Luckily, the public have already kind of framed the question during like the Women's March and the pro-choice and pro-life and all of this. And so for our culture here in America and kind of the public eye in society, we kind of already did some of the work for them. So what psychologists wanted was to have a considerable criteria, which is culture, environment, age, religion, and experience. Have there have been women who've had more than one abortion? Has there been a woman who have one abortion or no abortions at all? Which is kind of vague for the criteria, but we'll just kind of move past that. And psychologists also wanted to keep in mind about the risks and the causes. So we're not asking what are the risks of abortion, we're asking what are the causes of abortion. And another thing to keep in mind are what is the common denominator of having an abortion? Why are women having an abortion? Age, culture, environment, financial status, location, stage of life, religion. So many aspects that a lot of people tend to forget about that women take in consideration, especially those who are wanting to have children. They take into consideration, can we afford to have children at this time? Can we give up these things? Should we move? We can't have a baby in a studio apartment. It's not reasonable. We need school. We need to be in a safer area. We need, we have to be married before we have children. How our culture will affect towards it. So there are many aspects to thinking about this, and just even having to even decide to have an abortion. A lot of these already go through, like all of these. This process decides to go through. So what is the link between abortion and mental health? So the link between it is honestly financial. It is sadly to say that it is a lot cheaper to end up having an abortion or using Plan B or other ways to use contraceptives to protect yourself from having unwanted pregnancies than it is to end up having a child. Just the cost aspects are highly different. But once the pregnancy is confirmed, decisions are being made. And what are those decisions? Well, kind of like what I briefly said, the common denominator is the financial part. Women who want to have children but can't afford to have children right now. Women who don't want children who end up are having children, and women who unfortunately end up having children and can't raise it. So one thing that we know about the brain is that once there's a physical change in the body, the brain is quick to adapt. A lot of women's bodies and brain chemistry and hormone levels are starting to change once the egg is conceived. Now, the symptoms and the scientific aspects of pregnancy, like morning sickness, headaches, tiredness, tenderness in the breasts, mood swings, cravings, just all sorts of aspects of to what can be considered of having an abortion or being pregnant, getting a little ahead of myself. So all these natural things with the brain and the chemistry of the body is already happening before the pregnancy is even confirmed by the mother, before she even knows she's pregnant. So now the decisions are being made. Can we afford it? Is this a good time? Where am I? Is this a safe place to have a child? The mother is making maternal instincts already about what she can do with the baby. And can the baby actually survive by the needs and the demands that an infant would need when they're born? So once the decision is made to have an abortion, the process begins to happen. It's not the most inviting area to go into this decision, but a lot of women are alone or they have support, and once they are through that, it's just process after process after process. And if I'm correct, there are 3 stages of having an abortion. And so once you finally get to the point where you're having the abortion, a lot is happening. Doctors are in there talking to you, telling you to breathe, telling you it's going to be okay, you're exposing yourself. Things are going inside, but you can't quite feel it, but you can feel it, and things are just happening. So after the 20 minutes, 30 minutes of having the abortion and it's done with, a lot of women tend to feel grief, guilt, loss, depression, anxiety, traumatized. Traumatic event just happened. They know what was happening. Now it's reality. So the feeling before and after, the feeling is nerve-wracking. The feeling after, loss. Absolute loss. So the mental health of it, depression, anxiety, PTSD, traumatic event. The brain is now having to configure this event and have to process it. And not only have to process it emotionally, cognitively, physically, emotionally, socially, biologically, chemically, like there's a lot that's happening. So the long-term effects for most women is the PTSD, going into a doctor's office. Think of it as the conditioning, classical conditioning, going into a doctor's office, having to lay down, think about it. Seeing children, thinking about it. Seeing a family, thinking about it. It is constantly in the woman's mind. Now, this is something for women who do want to have children but just can't have it right now. When they get into a romantic partnership with a new relationship, the feeling of being stripped of that fantasy of being wanting the family, being stripped of that, already gone through it, and being nerve-wracking, So there's a lot of long-term effects. Women actually have stated in the article that they have confessed to their therapist, their psychologist, and doctors that they are depressed, that they are sad, that there is a feeling of loss and grief through this process. So the conclusion of that is a lot. And as you can tell, women's choice it's very controversial because of the women's choice and the pro-life and pro-choice and God's children, which was a huge, huge thing for the women's movement of during that time of pro-choice and pro-life. The emotional conclusion of it, the pain of reading through the traumatic, tough to think about of all that entails of having an abortion and what women went through. And it's hard to understand. Again, this article was really wordy and it was really long and it was very vague, but it was also confusing. So it was hard to understand, not only for educational purposes, but emotionally. It was hard to understand because you have to go through it and know somebody who went through it. But overall, this article really pointed out some good points that there are women out there who do have mental health problems after having an abortion. And it is hard to understand why, even though it was a decision that they made, it was just hard to understand for a lot of people what goes through their mind and why they feel this way and why is it quote unquote hard to get over. But yeah, so that was my research paper. And if there are any questions, comments, or whatnot, please let me know. But definitely, I recommend a read for sure. This will answer any more, gets you to critical thinking, makes you want to go out there and really think about it more. And here's a reference. So if you needed this, this is where you go. Again, this this article is really, really eye-opening. And again, it's a very suggested read.